absolute bomb over the flag
all the
court.
time.
We are family.
Outstanding effort again.
We're busting ours to kick yours.
That's big time.
-15.
Respect all, fear none.
Oh, did he belt that one?
Intensity is not a perfume.
It was a no-doubter.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
We are up in the bird's nest here at Oriole Park at Camden Yards. I'm Brendan Mortensen alongside Annie Claff, who did not have breakfast, which was mistake number one. And I think mistake number two, Annie, was what you had in place of that breakfast about 30 seconds ago before the podcast got started. Why don't you tell us?
I'm going to tell them.
Why don't you tell us?
So Amy Jennings, our producer,
Shout out to Amy Jennings.
lets us know that there are scones in the kitchen, and it's 10.
Maybe an act of sabotage.
10:58 at this point. I'm like, oh, perfect, a scone. I can just eat a scone, scarf it down before we go live.
Sure.
And then I come back to the podcast room and tell Brendan that they expired on September 4th.
And what is the date today that we are currently doing this podcast?
September 10th. But it was in an effort to boost my immune system. And
By eating something 6 days expired.
but the box next to it expired on the 10th, so I'm assuming like they were purchased together and are just fine.
Maybe. Wait, hold on. Did the box next to it also have scones in it?
Yeah, but it was vanilla.
And so you decided to eat the one that was 6 days
but it was
expired?
vanilla bean, and I wanted blueberry.
So the option was between
And the vanilla
bean not expired and blueberry a week expired. And you chose you chose blueberry really expired.
Yeah, because who wants a vanilla bean scone over
It's not
a blueberry
expired.
one?
I don't think you're going to be on the winning side of this argument.
Well, I may be dead before the end of this podcast, so
Halfway through, it's just going to be me discussing my most valuable Oriole votes because Annie will have fallen victim to a 6 days expired
I'll be
scone.
fine. Would you not have eaten a 6-day-old expired scone?
See, now you're second guessing yourself.
No,
This is the next stage.
No, I'm committing.
You went from being fully confident in your decision to now second guessing it.
No, I'm not second guessing my decision.
You don't sound confident
I stand
in your
by
decision.
it. There was no mold.
Well, that's number one on the checklist, I
Yeah.
suppose. All right. Well, we're going to talk about some baseball today.
I may or may not be here for the end of this podcast.
Who knows
but
if Annie will be here or not. We're going to be discussing our most valuable Oriole votes. We were tasked with submitting our votes. We tricked them. We got votes this year. Annie, you had a vote last year too, though, right?
I did.
And what did you do with that vote?
But I lost the email.
There it is.
And did not submit my most valuable Oriole.
But
last
this
year.
time we both submitted our votes, and we like to be transparent here on the Bird's Nest. So we're going to tell you who we voted for and why we voted for them, and you can yell at us all you want. And if the Oriole that you wanted to win, most valuable Oriole, doesn't win, you will know exactly who to blame, or hopefully who not to blame.
Yeah.
In our case. But before that, we're going to talk about injuries, as we always do here on the Bird's Nest, because we have a few of them to discuss. We'll start with last night's game. Jeremiah Jackson left the game after being hit on the elbow. Seems fine. Tony Mansolino was not concerned about the injury. It was important, too. He got hit in the elbow in the 8th inning. Jeremiah Jackson was playing right field last night. And there is probably a strong case to be made that after Jeremiah Jackson's at-bat there in the 8th, it's a one-run game at that point, eventually becomes a tie game. He is probably leaving that game after his at-bat for Daniel Johnson anyway, because Johnson has been used pretty often late in games as a defensive substitution, often for Jeremiah Jackson in the outfield. So there's really no point in leaving him in that game. I know that game eventually goes to extras, and the 2 spot in the lineup eventually does have another go-around. But at the time, it didn't make much sense to leave Jackson in the game if there was even a thought that the injury could be more severe than what it was. He got hit in the elbow. Seems to be okay.
Yeah, and especially with a guy like Jeremiah Jackson that has been playing so incredibly well coming up to the big leagues for the Orioles that you kind of want to be able to preserve him instead of get to a point where it gets worse. And like you mentioned, you could never have predicted that they were going to go into extra innings and then have another plate appearance. So I think it was probably the right call, hopefully, and it seems as if everything is just fine with Jeremiah Jackson. You also had Samuel Basayo, who got hit in the hand a couple of days ago now, I think, at this point.
He's back.
And he's back.
Hitting walk-offs.
Back in a big way, just as he was doing before. 2 walk-off wins.
What a weird sport baseball
so
is.
Weird.
The Orioles went so long without having a walk-off victory, and they have had 3 in the last 4 games.
Yeah. It's the most bizarre thing in the world.
Baseball, incredibly strange.
But he's back and doing extremely well. So luckily for those two, it seems as if it wasn't too serious for both of them.
Yeah, same case for Tomoyuki Sugano. From the sounds of things, he left his start after being hit in the foot. And he said afterwards, I think the next day, that the swelling wasn't as bad as he expected it to be and that he should be able to make his next start. So that's an encouraging sign for Tomoyuki Sugano. Dean Kramer left his start with a forearm injury. Mansolino said the MRI was encouraging, but he is going to miss at least 1 start. They're still trying to determine whether or not he is a candidate for the injured list. He's going to do some throwing. They're going to figure out how he's feeling, and then they'll go from there. So hopefully not a lengthy amount of time that Dean Kramer will miss, but he is going to miss at least 1 start, which is a bummer because Dean Kramer and Tomoyuki Sugano are really the 2 guys that have posted every 5th day for this Orioles rotation, which, as we are going to get into when talking about our MVO voting, I'm sure that holds a lot of weight this season. And so you're hoping that Kramer doesn't miss a lot of time. Nice that Sugano won't miss his next start. Those have been the 2 guys that have been reliable this year.
Also kind of like an of course moment, because it's like you get to a point where you can have a 6-man rotation. You have Kyle Bradish back. You have Tyler Wells back, pitching like they were before their injuries and their surgeries, or even like encouraging signs of how they can get back to how they were before there were season-ending injuries. And then, of course, you reach a point where you're like, okay, maybe we can't do a 6-man rotation.
Yeah, and then there goes Brandon Young and Dean Kramer, and it's just like, all right, 2025. Let's cut it out.
But it seems as if it shouldn't be too long of stints. But at least when you're in the middle of September, you kind of were hoping to get 2 guys that have been solid and consistent in the rotation for the entire season to remain consistent for the rest of the season, especially because Dean Kramer has been very consistent in his tenure in the big leagues. So I think that for him, obviously you hope for the best for both of them, but doesn't seem as if they should be too serious.
Yeah, and you're not going to push anything either. There's 3 weeks left in the season as we sit here in getting into mid-September already. You're not going to push Dean Kramer back. You're going to be cautious with him. Same goes for guys on the position player side returning from injury. Adley Rutschman will take batting practice this weekend. As the season starts to come to a close, the window for Adley Rutschman returning is getting smaller and smaller. Yeah. We'll see if we see him at some point in the big leagues this year. Jordan Westberg could start a rehab assignment this weekend, and Tyler O'Neill is in Norfolk rehabbing right now. So seems pretty likely that we'll see Tyler O'Neill before season's end. Jordan Westberg, who knows? Adley Rutschman, who knows? But Westy a little bit ahead of Adley Rutschman on that schedule. Would imagine that Adley would need to go on a rehab stint for a little while, but the Tides don't have that many games remaining. So we'll see what ends up happening with those guys, but would be nice to see O'Neill back on the field. Obviously, it's been a tough season for him injury-wise. Just get a little bit of rhythm going into the offseason. Same can be said for Jordan Westberg with his stints, really for all of these guys. I mean, they've all had multiple injured list stints this season. You're just hoping that they can find some rhythm to close out this year, end on somewhat of a positive note, go into the offseason healthy, and hopefully have a much healthier 2026.
Right, and getting late injuries like this is not something that the Orioles are foreign to, because obviously last year we saw that a lot with some late injuries and guys that you were hoping to make it before the Norfolk Tides season ended so that they could get rehab stints before coming to the big leagues for a playoff push. Obviously, this is a different scenario altogether because you're in a different position that you were last year, where you were really trying to make that playoff push. And then this year, obviously, right now, it's just there's not that much pressure to be able to do that or to have to do that. So I think, like, in a sense, it more than clearly makes sense that you're not getting guys like Dean Kramer or even Adley Rutschman or those kinds of people to force a little bit of a rehab performance to get back to the big leagues or even rush their return, just because it's a different trajectory. It's a different timeline for the Orioles. It's almost the middle of September, and that might be it. So
yeah, it's a completely different place than where you were to end last season. If the Orioles are fighting for a playoff spot right now, I think Jordan Westburg could be on crutches and still be in the lineup. Like those kind of guys are going to want to be out there as much as possible. Not that Jordan Westburg doesn't want to be out there, but obviously the team is going to be cautious given where they are in the standings over the last few weeks of the season. But that does lead us into our discussion for our MVO voting.
Woohoo.
As mentioned, we both had votes for Most Valuable Oriole. The way that it works is you have a third place vote that gets a certain amount of points, a second place vote that gets more points, and then the first place vote that gets the most points. I believe third place gets 1, second place gets 3, first place gets 5.
Yeah.
And so Baltimore media members will cast their votes. Whoever ends up with the most points will be the Most Valuable Oriole. For the last 2 seasons, that has been Gunnar Henderson. Adley Rutschman has won in the past. This was a strange season for MVO voting. It was a strange season overall. We are going to be talking about who we voted for. We will be revealing that to each other as well. We haven't talked about who we have voted for. But as mentioned, one of my honorable mentions is Jordan Westburg. I did not have Jordan Westburg in my top 3, but I do think he is an honorable mention. And he is pretty firmly the third best hitter in the Orioles lineup this season. Of course, the issue is that he has only played 73 games. Yep. If he played 130 games, like Gunnar Henderson and Jackson Holliday, he would probably garner some consideration for Most Valuable Oriole. I do think it's interesting, though, in the case of Jordan Westburg, it does bring up a conversation about what exactly the word valuable means in the Most Valuable Oriole discussion, because there is a real case to be made that the trajectory of the Orioles falls pretty closely to the trajectory of Jordan Westburg this season. I know the record hasn't been outstanding in all of the games that he has played, but if you look at the 2 months, where you were quote unquote without Jordan Westburg, April, I know Jordan Westburg was playing. Everybody kind of agrees he was really fighting through some injuries there and did not look like himself. The numbers will tell you that as well. We heard, from Brandon Hyde saying that he had trouble walking into the locker, like he was just beat up at that point. But in April, when Jordan Westburg was really fighting through those injuries and not playing great baseball, the Orioles were 9-16. In the month of May, Jordan Westburg was out, and the Orioles were 9-18. He comes back in mid-June. The Orioles are 7-6 in games that he plays. In July and August, they're 19-18 in games that he plays. So that's still not an outstanding record. But as mentioned, when Jordan Westburg was either hurt or was out, the Orioles really were not good. In games that Jordan Westburg was back, they were a slightly above 500 baseball team, which if you carried that forth for the entire season, you're at least in it right now. So while Westburg was not in the top 3 for me just because he only played in 73 games, he is very valuable to this team's success.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think that you're right in the sense of like, okay, each media member is going to have a different way of looking at this and how you bring kind of value to being the most valuable Oriole. I think for me, and I know that you and I had said beforehand, we haven't, like you mentioned, we haven't said to each other who we voted for, but we know that there's a clear-cut 1 and number 2.
Right.
3 is very much different, especially because you had a number of players who left at the trade deadline who could have been in this top 3. Number 3 after 1 and 2 gets a little bit more wishy-washy. So for me, I actually have Jordan Westburg in as my number 3 because of that. And I think that when you do look at, okay, how can someone be a difference maker? I see that with Jordan Westburg as opposed to like, okay, yes, he didn't necessarily get as many at-bats and playing time as a Jackson Holliday or even someone else that I consider my honorable mentions are Jackson Holliday, Colton Cowser. Colton Cowser's kind of a similar wavelength to Jordan Westburg with just the amount of playing time that they each had. They both had their ups and downs on the injured list and just like at the big league level. Jackson Holliday, very much more consistent, which is why I hold him in as my honorable mention, and I could totally be convinced that he should have been number 3 instead of an honorable mention. But I think that for me, the way that Jordan Westburg was very much so a difference maker when he was playing and was healthy, that's kind of how he's been the last few years. Also, last year we saw the Orioles lineup struggle immensely when Jordan Westburg was on the injured list. So I think that when you put it into the perspective of, okay, how much difference and value can this player make when they're healthy and ready to go comparatively to a guy like Jackson Holliday, and I'm not saying at all that he doesn't deserve an accolade like this or to make it into the top 3, because the talent there is amazing, and just because he is only 21 years old, I think that there's a lot more room for him to grow, most notably on defense, just kind of defensive value at second base. He's still learning, obviously. Jordan Westburg has a 799 OPS, 2 outs above average, and a plus 10 batting run value, at least for Colton Cowser's 661 OPS, minus 1 outs above average, and then Jackson Holliday, obviously a much larger sample size than those two guys, but 713 OPS and minus 1 outs above average. So I just think that for me, what held my weight, at least in the third position, because it'll be different for my top 2, the third position for me was like, okay, who's the biggest difference maker? Yeah,
and Jordan Westburg, as of right now, 3rd in home runs, 3rd in RBIs, 3rd in hits, 3rd in total bases and runs scored, even with it playing half the games.
Yeah.
As Jackson Holliday and Gunnar Henderson, he was impactful enough when he was on the field to garner certainly consideration, with me having him as an honorable mention, you having him as your 3rd place vote. I think that makes a lot of sense. One guy that I do want to mention, as I had 2 honorable mentions, Dean Kramer was another one for me. Ironic, I know, because the argument I'm about to make is that he posted every 5th day, and I know it's ironic that he is literally about to miss his next start, but it's 28 games, 27 starts, a 4.43 ERA. I know those aren't outstanding numbers. He had a really good stretch in the middle of the season. Dean Kramer started slow, but in a 19-game stretch, I know that's kind of an arbitrary number to pick, but from the beginning of May to mid-August, he had a 3.16 ERA in 19 games, and he completed 7 innings 8 times.
Yeah.
It's a really, really good stretch of baseball. And so I went with Kramer just as an honorable mention, because there are not guys in this rotation that posted that often. As we mentioned off the top, it is Dean Kramer and Tomoyuki Sugano that have appeared in more than 25 games for this team in the rotation this year. Charlie Morton appeared in 23 games, and he was dealt at the deadline.
Right.
Outside of that, the most starts made by an Oriole this year, Cade Povich at 17, outside of Dean Kramer and Tomoyuki Sugano. So there is just value in being able to pencil somebody in every 5th day, and Dean Kramer brought that this year and had some really good stretches of baseball.
Yeah, and I think that posting every 5th day kind of gets overwritten a little bit, because you do look, and the first thing you see is an ERA, or the first thing you see is a strikeouts per 9 innings, the WHIP.
Sure.
And it's it's easier to forget who does post every 5th day, and I think that that's something that we focused in on when they brought in Charlie Morton in the offseason, was how consistent he was in being able to post every 5th day and staying healthy. Obviously, he had a rough start when he was first in Oriole, but then really came back and made a huge turnaround, which is why some teams could have used him at the trade deadline. But I think that it is really important to note for Dean Kramer that he has done that up until this point, obviously. Also, I don't know how much weight you're putting in for WAR for these players as well when it comes to most valuable Oriole, but out of everybody else in the rotation aside from Trevor Rogers, Dean Kramer has the 2nd best baseball reference WAR. I mean, it's 1.4. It's not immaculate compared to a Trevor Rogers, but I think that when you look at all positions, all pitchers, I think Dean Kramer is worth noting. Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I have him as my other honorable mention as well. But we'll go into we talked about Jordan Westburg a little bit. My 3rd place vote was Jackson Holliday. Sure. Because when I'm thinking about what happened in the 2025 season, it's the injury conversation. It's the consistency conversation. Jackson Holliday had some more ebbs and flows this season. When you're talking about time on the field, I do agree with you that Jordan Westburg was really, really impactful in the games that he played. An OPS just shy of 800. That is better than what Jackson Holliday posted this year.
but it's 134 games for Jackson Holliday. And similar to my Dean Kramer conversation, there is so much value in being able to pencil guys into the lineup every single day. Jackson Holliday has had his growing pains. He is 21 years old. He has had a month or a few weeks of not being great offensively. He has had some growing pains at second base defensively. He is working on his range there. It is going to take a little bit for him to fully develop there defensively. And so the overall numbers for Holliday aren't incredible. They are really, really good for a 21-year-old, but he is 9th on the team in Baseball Reference WAR at 1.2. The OPS of 713 is good. It's not awesome. The 250 batting average is good. It's not awesome. He does lead the team in home runs with 17, which is not something that anybody expected out of your second baseman, let alone a 21-year-old second baseman. But as mentioned, what it came down to for me was just you could pencil him into the lineup every single day. It's 134 games. The current Oriole next on the list outside of Jackson Holliday and Gunnar Henderson is Adley Rutschman with 85 games.
Which is crazy.
So that duo, obviously Gunnar Henderson, we are going to talk about as we continue to move up our list for MVO voting. But Gunnar Henderson and Jackson Holliday are the two guys that you could write into the lineup this year. And with that, Jackson Holliday is second on the team in hits, RBIs, doubles, triples, walks, extra base hits, total bases, runs, and stolen bases. He is firmly the second best position player on this team just based on the counting stats, even though Jordan Westberg has put up, a better OPS and slugging percentage and things like that. He just played in the games.
Yeah.
And that is something that you were sorely missing from most of the other guys on this team this year.
Yeah, no, I definitely hear you, and it's part of the reason why I wasn't so set in stone for my number 3 and honorable mention is because there is really a large amount of importance and value that is held with playing every day and being able to remain consistent and not getting injured, because I think he hasn't made any stints to the injured list at all this year. No. He's probably one of how many people
even Gunnar
on this
Henderson
team
started the year on the injured list, so it's pretty much just Jackson Holliday that has been playing all the time.
And I think for Holliday, it's easier to look at, like similarly to Dean Kramer, it's easier to look at the numbers and the stats for the whole season as opposed to looking in on specific ones. Like if you look at the jump from 2024 to 2025, it's an incredible jump for a 21-year-old and a guy who had just made his debut. For an OPS to jump up almost 200 points, maybe like 150 if my quick math does me well. But in terms of what he's done for the Orioles and for himself going from year 1 to year 2 is an incredible jump. And then also even just as of late, he's been playing extremely well. I think the last 11 games, he has 1 triple, 3 doubles, 2 home runs.
He's walking a ton.
Walking 10 times in the last 11 games.
Yep.
So I think you are very excited to see how the year 1 to year 2 jump goes and then compare it from year 1 to year 2 to year 3, and just to say you're a 21-year-old and probably reaching the 3rd spot on a most valuable Oriole list on many people in this Orioles media world is a really impressive thing, and hats off to Jackson Holliday for playing almost every single day.
Yeah, and I want to emphasize too that this isn't just a you showed up to work award. Jackson Holliday did have some really good stretches of baseball. You mentioned over the past few weeks there have been some really encouraging signs. He's taking walks. We like the aggression sometimes out of Jackson Holliday on the first pitch swings where he's just hunting fastball. He gets one, but he has seemed to find a really good balance over the past few weeks. The month of May, hits 287 with 5 homers and an 819 OPS. He was a finalist in All-Star voting. Remember, it came down to the fan vote there, and he was in the top 2. 722 OPS in July, and he hit 270. There have been some really good stretches of baseball.
Yeah,
and as you mentioned, it's his age 21 season. He is only going to get better. It wouldn't surprise me at all if next year we are talking about Jackson Holliday in the top 1 or 2 for MVO voting. It's a really nice season. He played in as many games as you could hope that he would this year, and that's not something that can be said for a lot of the guys in this org, unfortunately.
Also underrated to have your shortstop and your second baseman playing the most out of anyone in the lineup is huge.
Yeah, because they're going to be building that chemistry as well. Hopefully that is a double play combo for a really, really long time in an Orioles uniform. So we have not been subtle about it. There is an obvious top two here for most valuable Oriole. It is Gunnar Henderson and it is Trevor Rogers. They have had far and away the best seasons of any Orioles this year. And so it's really just going to come down to who you have at number one and who you have at number two. I have a 1A and 1B because it is really difficult for me to separate these two guys. Gunnar Henderson leads the Orioles in practically every statistical offensive category, and Trevor Rogers has just been the best pitcher on the planet for the last 2.5 months, but it has just been the last 2.5 months.
Right.
Trevor Rogers has only started 15 games for the Orioles this year. Granted, it is a 1.51 ERA. Yeah. So we'll talk about who we had in second and who we had in first. I am not going to be very staunchly like, I can't believe you voted this guy for.
Me neither.
Either way, I get who you have number two and I get who you have number one. So I guess we'll just start. We'll have conversations about both of these guys, but I will start with who I had at number two.
Okay.
And then I'll ask you who you had at number two. At number two, I voted for Gunnar Henderson.
I did too.
Okay. All right. We'll talk about Gunnar Henderson as our second place vote here. As mentioned, I think he is far and away the best position player on this team this year. The stats would absolutely back that up. He has a 4.6 baseball reference WAR. The next, current Oriole on that list is Adley Rutschman with a 1.8 baseball reference WAR. That is a pretty sizable gap there.
Yeah.
As mentioned with Jackson Holliday, he plays 130 plus games. That is really, really valuable. He plays a really good defensive shortstop. I know the outs above average, according to StatCast, has not been outstanding. We talked about this last week.
Yeah.
Gunnar Henderson has become a much better defensive shortstop this year.
Whether the metrics say it or not.
Yes. Yeah. He is doing the fundamental things a lot better. He is not committing as many errors as he has in the past. He's got a 790 OPS, 272 batting average, 16 homers. It is a down year by Gunnar Henderson standards. That is only because his 2024 season was so absurdly good that even a season where he finishes with 5 baseball reference WAR won't reach what he did last year with a WAR over 9, or even in 2023 when he had a WAR over 6 and was top 10 in MVP voting.
Yeah.
Gunnar, you pencil him in every single day into the third spot in the lineup. He leads this team in practically every category outside of home runs, but it's hits, RBIs, doubles, triples, walks, extra base hits, total bases, runs, and stolen bases. That is all the important ones.
Yeah.
I don't know where this team is offensively or defensively for that matter. I don't know where this team is, period, without Gunnar Henderson. And this, voting him second here is not an indictment of the kind of season that Gunnar Henderson has had. I do think it is a bit down offensively from what we are accustomed to seeing from him. But the whole team has been down offensively this year. That's not a secret. And so I think if this team is playing better baseball, Gunnar Henderson is probably on that trajectory as well, playing better baseball. He's still my number two.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think just with the way that you said, okay, you're not going to be upset if I had Gunnar Henderson at number one or you did, vice versa, whatever. I'm the same way because it completely makes sense for someone to have the perspective of, okay, your most valuable Oriole, number one, should be someone that is playing every day.
Yeah.
Because I think that's the biggest difference when it comes down to selecting a pitcher and a starting pitcher for that matter, as opposed to someone that is in the lineup that's playing offensively and defensively every single day. That's the biggest debate that goes in your mind of okay, I can put Trevor Rogers as number one, knowing that he's only had X amount of starts since May 24th when he came back from the injured list.
Yeah.
But he's performed extremely well in that span.
Yeah, that's the hard part about it. You're talking about a guy who's played 15 games in Trevor Rogers versus a guy who's playing 140, 150 games this season in Gunnar Henderson.
And especially when you kind of look at the same debate that we had almost for Jordan Westburg as opposed to Jackson Holliday, was how much value can you bring either off the bench or off the injured list or whatnot. But in this case scenario, so I'm saying I make that argument for number 3 spot, which sounds a little bit contradictory, but I'm also saying that for Gunnar Henderson, it would totally make sense if he were to win number 1 just because of the contribution that he makes every day.
Yeah.
But at the same time, what we've seen from Trevor Rogers is historical. And from Gunnar, like you mentioned, it's very hard to follow up for an offensive season that you posted last year. In 893 OPS in 2024, yes, 790 this year is still really, really good, especially because he's still a young guy. But it's not quite what it was in 2024. The 16 home runs and 22 stolen bases, not quite what it was in 2024. When I look at the positional value and the base running value, Gunnar brings a lot more than Trevor Rogers does, just because playing every day. 97th percentile on the bases. That's 6 extra runs scored on his base running speed and instincts, which is huge. You get that from Gunnar Henderson. You don't get that, obviously, from Trevor Rogers. We'll talk about Trevor Rogers in a second, but the positional value specifically for Gunnar Henderson makes him the surefire 2 candidate or 1. And I think that if you put anybody else at number 2 outside of Trevor Rogers and Gunnar Henderson,
if these aren't your top 2, I have a lot of questions about your MVO voting, but I do think that's interesting too, talking about Gunnar's 2024 and 2023, because inherently voting for Gunnar Henderson, that does creep into your mind a little bit, that last year he was otherworldly. A Baseball Reference WAR over 9, 37 homers, a 281 batting average, an 893 OPS, 159 games played. That is a ridiculous season. It is one of the best seasons we have seen by an Oriole position player, period. One of the best seasons by an Oriole shortstop ever. Top 5 in American League MVP voting, an all-star. Unbelievable.
And it's crazy to remember that too, because I remember points of last season where I'm like, okay, Gunnar should be carrying this offense, but he's not right now because there were so many different slumps throughout the entire lineup towards the end of the season.
Sure.
And when you look at the kind of defensive errors that you mentioned is a lot better, but it's crazy to look back at how I was feeling at multiple parts throughout last season and then look at the overarching zoom out 893 OPS.
It was an absurd season from Gunnar Henderson. Even 2023 was a really, really good year. A Baseball Reference WAR over 6, an 814 OPS, 28 homers. And so there is a little bit of looking at 2025 and Gunnar's age 24 season where he is in his prime right now. I mean, it's incredible that his prime started when he was 23.
I know.
Even 22 years old, but that's where he is. And the OPS is down. The home run numbers are down. The slugging percentage is down. And so there is a little bit of like, okay, this is a bit of a down season for Gunnar Henderson. I think he's made a lot of strides in a lot of places. And I would not be surprised at all if Gunnar comes out next year having learned the lessons of 2025 and posts, again, one of the best seasons of his career next year. If it rivals 2024, I wouldn't be surprised at all. But in that voting, there was a little bit of, hey, you know what? This is kind of a down year for Gunnar Henderson.
Yeah.
And he would probably tell you the same thing offensively. The numbers aren't where we expected them to be this year. Expecting the numbers to be an 890 plus OPS again is crazy, just because that's an unbelievable season. But you would expect the OPS for Gunnar Henderson to be, somewhere around 850?
Yeah.
I don't think that's an insane expectation. It's incredibly lofty, but Gunnar Henderson is worthy of those lofty expectations.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think when you kind of look back at the beginning of the season too, I mean, our most valuable Oriole predictions were a little bit rogue. At least mine was. I said Adley Rutschman. I will take that on the chin. Obviously did not expect this many injuries and whatever. Anyway, but Gunnar Henderson, we both said, okay, he's going to be the highest OPS on this team at the beginning of the season. You had a lot of expectations for everyone on this team for that matter, but for Gunnar Henderson, it was there, and it is going to be there every single year. And like you mentioned, he would be the first person to say, like, okay, last year was way better than it was this year. Maybe I don't kind of deserve to be the most valuable Oriole. But for what he's done in a year where it's been down for everyone, I think it's still very impressive. A 790 OPS when you had a very struggling team throughout most of the year is still something to look at.
Yeah, it's a luxury to be able to look at Gunnar Henderson and expect him to be a top 3, top 5 player in the American League. But that's what a season like 2024 does. Those are the kinds of expectations that are placed upon you after having an MVP caliber season like he did last year. And it is also a luxury to say, man, this was kind of a down season for Gunnar Henderson, and the OPS is going to finish right around 800 with 20 home runs and a 5 WAR.
Right.
That, as a down season, is most other players' career years.
Yeah.
So that is, again, a luxury to talk about with Gunnar Henderson there. But that brings us to our number one vote, which we both had as Trevor Rogers. The worst trade in Orioles history. Trevor Rogers.
Turns into the most valuable Oriole.
Who would have thought we'd be here? And as we said, this is a very interesting conversation about who is number one and who is number two, because Trevor Rogers starts 15 games for the Orioles this season so far, and Gunnar Henderson is going to play in 130, 140, 150. The thing that made me vote for Trevor Rogers as the most valuable Oriole this year is just kind of a baseline of you have to reward somebody for having a season like this. And it's unfortunate that the season for Trevor Rogers started when it did, because he starts the year on the injured list with the dislocated kneecap. But it's a 1.51 ERA in 15 games with a whip of 0.868 and 4.35 strikeouts per walk. He has allowed 16 earned runs in 15 games. And if you are talking purely about who is the most valuable Oriole, who is the person that when they are on the baseball field, they make the biggest difference in your team winning or losing, that is Trevor Rogers. I understand he has only been on the baseball field 15 times in an Orioles uniform this year, but the Orioles are 12-3 in games started by Rogers this season. That is the definition of value. You won 12 out of your 15 games where he is on the mound. On May 24th, which was the day that Trevor Rogers was called up as the 27th man for that doubleheader in Boston, the Orioles were 16-34 going into that game that he started. Since then, they have gone 51-43, which is 8 games above 500, and they would be in a fight with the Mariners for third place in the American League wildcard. That is how good the team has been since Trevor Rogers debuted. Of course, that is not all Trevor Rogers. He can only throw every 5th day. But this has been a much, much better baseball team since they have been able to rely on Trevor Rogers every 5th day. And he has been so absurdly good that it just was difficult to leave him out of the number one spot.
No, I am in complete agreement with you. You even took 2 of those record stats out of my notes right here. But it's just like, how can you not look at those? The 12-3 record when Rogers starts and the 51-43 since May 24th, his return. How can you not look at those and see a vibe change or a shift in the way that the Orioles operated since then, or the value that he brings when he sets foot on the mound each and every 5th day? Even to mention, too, that he has been consistent since he started coming back, since his return from the injured list. It's not like he's fallen up and down with the injured list at all. I think with Rogers, yes, we had this conversation already, but it's very difficult to some to put a starter in the number one spot for most valuable Oriole just because they're only playing every 5th day, as opposed to Gunnar Henderson, who's posting every single day or playing every single day. But when you look at what Trevor Rogers has done, it is without a doubt historical. And like you mentioned, you kind of have to reward someone that does that. And I think that this is the perfect way to do it, just because of what the Orioles have been able to do when he's starting, or since he even came back from the injured list. It's been a completely different change in vibe, like I already said, but in also just like kind of mindset, I think. And I don't know if it's like if it's a thing where, okay, it's Trevor Rogers Day, everybody else is going to kind of pick up their own slack behind him so that you don't waste a little bit of a good start.
But there is something to be said for that. There is something to be said for the mindset that the Orioles must have when Trevor Rogers is on the mound and you're going out on defense and you're like, all right, we got Trevor Rogers.
Right.
And even in the lineup, it's, can we put 3 runs on the board? Because we're going to win this game because Trevor Rogers is pitching.
And even, okay, the other stat that I wrote down, which is like actually just insane. According to StatCast, a pitching run value, which is in the top 2% of Major League Baseball for preventing 30 runs. It's just like ridiculous that he's prevented, through his pitching, 30 runs.
Yeah.
Which is in the top 2% of all MLB pitchers. I mean, obviously, this is a guy that was the AL Pitcher of the Month in August. But when you zoom out, and it's just like...
He's going to get Cy Young votes, and if he gave you 30 starts this year, he might win the American League Cy Young.
Yeah.
Who knows how long this stretch of dominance would have continued if he would be able to continue it over a 30-game sample size. But he has been so ridiculously good. We talked about some of these stats 2 weeks ago, but I want to bring them up again. He is the first pitcher in Orioles history to allow 2 runs or fewer in 11 straight starts. And think about some of the pitchers that the Orioles have had. Hall of Famer Jim Palmer, Hall of Famer Mike Messina, never did that. Pitchers in the integration era since 1947 with an ERA below 150, 70 strikeouts, and 2 home runs or less in their first 13 starts of a season. 1981 Nolan Ryan, 1994 Greg Maddux, and 2025 Trevor Rogers. And if you add 20 walks or fewer into that conglomeration of stats, it is just Trevor Rogers.
Yeah.
It is one of the best, I know it's a small sample size, but it is one of the best 13, 15 starts in MLB history.
Yeah.
You just have to reward that.
Yeah,
in my opinion.
I completely agree. And in no way, like, am I saying that Trevor Rogers has created all this value that Gunnar Henderson didn't, because we already had been over that.
It's 1A, 1B with those two guys.
But when you do look at kind of, and obviously it's very different for a position player because there are so many different position players and guys through the lineup that can hold their own as opposed to one guy on the mound. But for Gunnar Henderson, at least, when he came back in April 4th, obviously that's very early, but 64 and 73 is the Orioles' record since his return. 14 runs created from base running and batting combined, which is still great. And obviously, Gunnar Henderson is not the only person when it comes to that record of 64 and 73. But for Trevor Rogers single-handedly to come back from the injured list, and the Orioles get a 51 and 43 record, and he helps prevent 30 runs.
Yeah. I mean, Trevor Rogers has appeared in 15 of the Orioles' 144 games this year, which is about 10.5%. The Orioles, as mentioned, have won 12 of his 15 starts. 12 out of their 67 wins is 18% of their wins. So 10% of the game, he's responsible for 18% of their wins. There is nobody on this team that, when they take the field, gives you a better chance to win a baseball game than Trevor Rogers. And I know Gunnar Henderson obviously is an integral part of the lineup day in and day out, as is Jackson Holliday, as is a healthy Jordan Westberg or a healthy Adley Rutschman, who was almost an honorable mention for me as well.
Yeah.
Just because you know how much value he has defensively. Yeah. The pitchers talk about it day in and day out when Adley Rutschman catches a baseball game. So he was almost an honorable mention for me as well. But Trevor Rogers, he just gives you the best chance to win a baseball game. And I think, for me, that goes into the valuable part of the discussion. If somebody votes Gunnar Henderson first, and if Gunnar Henderson wins Most Valuable Oriole because he played 140 games and Trevor Rogers played 18 or however many starts he has left, I get it. And Trevor Rogers didn't appear in that many games this season, but he gave you the best chance to win a baseball game. And the Orioles were the best when Trevor Rogers is on the mound.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, there is no one else on this Orioles roster in 2025 that has asserted more dominance in any type of play, whether that's
ridiculous.
Behind the dish, whether that's in the outfield, whether that's in the bullpen, whether that's on the mound. It's Trevor Rogers.
In his 10-game stretch in July and August, he had a 1.19 ERA with 63 strikeouts, and the Orioles were 8-2 in those games. Yeah. He allowed more than one earned run, a grand total of one time, and he allowed 2 earned runs. And the fewest amount of innings he threw in that 10-game stretch was 6. He went 7 innings, 1 earned, 4 times in a row.
I know. And I know he's coming off of 5 1/3 innings, but you got to come back to earth at some point.
And that's the funny part, is we're talking about 5 1/3 innings and 2 earned runs against the Dodgers. We're one of the best offenses in baseball, and we're like, wow, down start for Trevor Rogers, huh?
Yeah,
he worked into the 6th inning and allowed 2 earned runs, struck out 6 and walked 1.
We were watching
And the Orioles won that game, by the way.
We were watching that ceremony from the warehouse, Brendan and me, and Brendan looks at me and is like, wow, this like really isn't a Rogers start, and then looks at the scoreboard and is like, oh, wait, there's only one earned run.
Yep.
It's in the 6th inning, and it's the Dodgers.
He has had one bad start this year, and it was his second start of the season in Tampa, where he goes 2 1/3, 3 earned runs. And that game was a really weird circumstance where the Orioles scored 8 earned runs and were on the field for about 45 minutes before Rogers could get back on the mound. That's just a weird game. That's his worst start of the season. And outside of that, it's a pair of starts against the Rangers, who are fighting for a playoff spot, and the Dodgers, who are the Dodgers, where he goes 5 1/3 and 2 earned runs each time.
Yeah.
That is tied for his second worst start of the year.
And
5 1/3, 2 earned runs.
Right.
That's 2 outs away from being a quality start.
And you're still getting 6 strikeouts against the Dodgers.
And they won both of those games.
Yeah.
They won both of those games.
It's just like there is nobody else that can bring that kind of energy, that mindset, that dominance to the field and to the mound like Rogers has done for the Orioles this year.
Yeah. Well,
There you
those
have
are
it.
our votes.
Yeah.
So just to recap, we both voted Trevor Rogers for our most valuable Oriole. We both had Gunnar Henderson in second place for MVO. I had Jackson Holliday in third place, and you had Jordan Westbrook in third place. Those are our votes for MVO. When those votes come out and we hear about the most valuable Oriole and you see the voting, you will know exactly who to yell at or who not to yell at.
Because it'll be our fault.
Yeah, but let us know who you think should have won most valuable Oriole. We laid out our arguments here, and I do like that voting for something, because if you're voting for it, you should be able to argue about it in a 45-minute podcast. So that's what we tried to do here, to be transparent for you guys, to tell you about who we're voting for.
We're an open book out here on the
really
Bird's
are.
Nest.
We are confident in our votes.
And now you know that I've eaten an expired scone.
Somebody backed you up on Facebook,
Really?
though. George on Facebook says expired means nothing.
Exactly. Thank you,
So you're
George.
fine. Shout out, George.
Shout out to my immune system getting stronger.
There you go. But we'll see who wins most valuable Oriole. We'll find out over the next few weeks here. But that'll just about do it for this week's edition of The Bird's Nest. Thank you for following along with us live on YouTube and Facebook. We love reading your comments about our expired foods. If you didn't catch us live, you can catch us after the fact on Spotify, SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you find your podcasts. You can find us here on The Bird's Nest. Big thank you to Amy Jennings behind the scenes for producing this one. For Annie Claff, I am Brendan Mortensen, and we'll catch you next time.